The sun filtered through the large windows of the martial arts dojo, casting long shadows on the polished wooden floor. Inside, the atmosphere was calm, a soft hum of quiet training, the steady thump of feet striking mats, and the occasional crisp snap of a board being broken. Among the practitioners, one figure moved with effortless precision, Chuck Norris. His presence alone seemed to slow the world around him. Every movement was controlled, measured, and full of silent authority. Meanwhile, at the far end of the room, Steven Seagal strode in with his trademark confidence, sunglasses perched low on his nose, arms crossed, and a smirk playing across his lips. He had trained many places, fought countless opponents, and carried himself with the arrogance of someone certain of his superiority. Today, though, he had a target in mind, and that target was the quiet man everyone else seemed to respect instinctively. Seagal's voice cut through the calm air, sharp and brash. "I'm willing to bet I'm stronger than anyone here, even him." All eyes turned subtly toward Chuck Norris. The room's quiet anticipation thickened. Chuck looked up, his gaze calm, almost amused. He didn't respond. There was no need for words. His poise spoke louder than any boast. Seagal took a step forward, trying to assert dominance. His movements were deliberate, exaggerated, meant to draw attention and impress the onlookers. A few younger martial artists whispered among themselves, recording the unfolding scene on their phones. Something about this moment felt monumental, though none of them yet understood why. The tension was electric. Chuck Norris stood silently, hands relaxed at his sides, muscles taut but unassuming. Seagal, in contrast, flexed subtly, testing the waters, trying to provoke a reaction. He leaned slightly closer, a smirk on his face, and muttered just loud enough for Chuck, though Chuck didn't seem to hear him at all. The crowd sensed the unspoken challenge. Something was about to happen, something the dojo had never witnessed before. And yet, Seagal had no idea what he was stepping into. What Steven didn't know, what nobody in the room yet realized, was that he was about to challenge a man who had mastered every move he thought he understood. A man whose calm was stronger than his arrogance. A man whose black belt in karate was legendary. The stage was set. The calm before the storm. The dojo buzzed quietly at first, but the tension in the air was growing, almost palpable. Steven Seagal's eyes never left Chuck Norris, who remained perfectly composed, a faint smirk on his lips, as if he knew something the others didn't. The young martial artists and spectators around them sensed the unspoken challenge, whispering among themselves, holding up their phones to capture every second of the unfolding encounter. Seagal stepped forward, his movements deliberate, exaggerated, almost theatrical. He flexed slightly, rolled his shoulders, and muttered under his breath, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "I've faced stronger opponents than this, but let's see what he's got." The words hung in the air. A few people chuckled nervously. They had seen Steven Seagal on screen many times, the master of Aikido, the man who never seemed to be defeated. Yet there was something different about this calm, quiet figure standing opposite him. Chuck's black belt wasn't just a title. It was a presence, an aura that seemed to make the room itself hold its breath. Seagal tried to provoke Chuck with a series of flashy, controlled movements, spins, kicks, and strikes meant more for show than actual combat. Each move was precise, a testament to his years of practice. But Chuck didn't flinch. He didn't move unnecessarily. He didn't even blink. He simply observed, his eyes calm, analyzing every movement, every shift in balance, every subtle muscle twitch. The crowd started leaning in, sensing that something extraordinary was about to happen. A few spectators whispered nervously, "Who's going to make the first move? Does he even know who he's facing?" Some pulled out their phones, recording every second. The dojo suddenly felt like a global stage, even if most of the crowd didn't realize it yet. Steven, frustrated that Chuck wasn't responding, increased his intensity. He tried a more direct approach, a high kick aimed toward Chuck's side, a move that could have taken down many less experienced fighters. But Chuck simply shifted his stance, subtle, almost imperceptible, letting the kick glide harmlessly past him. He barely moved, yet the effect was undeniable. The kick's force dissipated, wasted, leaving Seagal momentarily unbalanced. A murmur ran through the crowd. Even the other martial artists could sense it. Chuck wasn't just defending. He was demonstrating mastery, control, and discipline. Seagal's arrogance was starting to crack, and for the first time, he felt tension he hadn't expected. Still, Seagal tried to assert himself verbally, raising his voice, attempting to intimidate Chuck with words rather than force. "You think standing there silently will help you? I've seen tougher opponents than you." Chuck's response was simple, quiet, yet carried a weight that silenced the whispers around him. Strength isn't about talking. It's about control. The dojo went quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Seagal, used to being the center of attention, was now faced with a calm that didn't bend to arrogance or intimidation. The young bystanders and spectators were captivated. Phones recorded every moment, but they weren't just filming, they were feeling it. The tension, the drama, the clash of confidence versus mastery, it was magnetic. And then came the engagement moment, subtle, but intentional. One of the crowd members, speaking toward the camera, whispered, "Where are you watching this from? Which country or city? Drop it in the comments. Let's see how far the story spreads." Seagal, noticing the cameras, tried to play to them, performing a series of exaggerated blocks and strikes as if to prove himself to the online audience. But Chuck still didn't react unnecessarily. His calm, measured presence contrasted sharply with Seagal's theatrics. Every action Seagal took, Chuck neutralized effortlessly, not even needing to raise a hand. The tension in the room reached a crescendo. The audience was on edge. Some began to realize that Seagal had underestimated his opponent. Every flinchless dodge, every subtle shift in balance, spoke louder than words. Chuck's experience wasn't just in strength. It was in strategy, patience, and timing. For a moment, Seagal paused, catching his breath, realizing that the man standing silently in front of him wasn't just another opponent. This was someone whose calm carried authority, someone whose black belt was more than a piece of cloth. It was a lifetime of mastery. The whispers grew louder, spreading like wildfire among the bystanders. "Wait, who is he really? I think that's Chuck Norris." Seagal, still unaware of the legend standing before him, squared his shoulders, a flicker of doubt appearing behind his sunglasses. But the real drama was just beginning. The dojo was no longer just a room. It was a stage, and every movement, every pause, was a prelude to a showdown that no one watching would forget. The dojo had gone completely silent. The soft hum of normal training had disappeared, replaced by the electric tension between two martial arts legends. Steven Seagal's arrogance was still visible, but now it was tinged with frustration. Each attempt to assert dominance, each exaggerated spin or strike, seemed to fall flat. Chuck Norris, calm and composed, simply observed, like a predator who doesn't need to move to control the room. Seagal flexed, trying to regain control. He paced a few steps closer, letting his movements carry confidence, trying to draw attention from the crowd and the cameras. "I've faced bigger, stronger, and faster opponents than you," he boasted. "Let's see if your reputation is real." Chuck didn't answer. Not a word. Not a flinch. Only a calm, steady gaze that seemed to measure everything. Speed, timing, balance, and intent. Every second Seagal spent trying to intimidate him, Chuck simply absorbed. The contrast was stark. One man consumed by ego, the other by skill and discipline. Seagal decided to escalate. He attempted a rapid series of strikes, testing Chuck's reactions. Each strike was precise, meant to overwhelm and intimidate. But Chuck, with effortless grace, sidestepped, parried, or absorbed each motion. There was no wasted movement, no unnecessary force, only controlled mastery. The crowd leaned forward, gasping and whispering. Every move Seagal made was being recorded, every subtle shift in Chuck's stance observed. The tension in the room was unbearable. Seagal's frustration began to show. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He was used to being the dominant figure, the man everyone watched in awe, and now he was being outmatched without even a direct strike landing on him. Finally, in a moment of desperation, Seagal lunged with a spinning kick aimed directly at Chuck's midsection. The crowd held its breath. Time seemed to slow. Chuck shifted slightly, his footwork barely noticeable, and the kick slid past him harmlessly. Seagal stumbled slightly, regaining balance, his frustration now palpable. The whispers among the spectators grew louder. "Who is this guy? Wait, that's Chuck Norris." The realization began to spread, but Seagal remained oblivious. He believed the calmness was just arrogance, a trick, a lack of fear he could exploit. But Chuck wasn't trying to intimidate. He was in complete control. Seagal's voice rose. "Don't just stand there. Show me what you've got." Chuck stepped forward slowly, but deliberately, his movements minimal yet commanding. The room seemed to shrink around him. He said nothing, yet every word unspoken carried weight. His presence alone told the crowd that skill doesn't need to boast, that strength doesn't need to shout. The spectators began murmuring among themselves, caught between disbelief and awe. Some whispered directly to the camera. "If you were in Steven's place, would you stay calm or walk away? Comment your answer below." Seagal, sensing the shift in the crowd's energy, tried to regain control with a more aggressive approach. He attempted a quick series of wrist locks and throws, but Chuck's reactions were flawless, effortless, and precise. Each move Seagal attempted was countered without effort, and yet, Chuck didn't seem to attack or humiliate him, only redirect, neutralize, and maintain complete control. The dojo was electrified. Some younger martial artists exchanged nervous glances, realizing they were witnessing more than just a duel. It was a lesson in humility, discipline, and mastery. Seagal's confidence was waning with every failed attempt, replaced by tension, doubt, and a growing awareness that he might have misjudged the man in front of him. Finally, Seagal paused, chest heaving, eyes narrowing, hands trembling slightly. Chuck Norris didn't flinch, didn't move unnecessarily. The calm strength emanating from him was a force more powerful than Seagal's aggression, more commanding than words or theatrics. It was the quiet authority of a true martial artist, a man who had earned every black belt and every title. The crowd leaned forward, sensing the climax approaching. Cameras clicked and recorded, capturing not just the fight, but the lesson unfolding in real time. Arrogance could never overpower skill, ego could never match discipline, and a calm, measured presence was stronger than force itself. For Seagal, the breaking point was approaching. He had tried everything he knew: speed, strength, intimidation, and yet he was outmatched without a single blow landing. The crowd whispered, the cameras rolled, and Chuck Norris stood silently, the embodiment of mastery and quiet dominance. The tension was unbearable. The moment of reckoning was at hand, and nobody in the room, not even Seagal, could predict what would happen next. The dojo had become electric. Every spectator leaned forward, eyes wide, phones raised to capture the unfolding confrontation. Steven Seagal's frustration was mounting. Every move he made was neutralized with such effortless precision that even the most experienced martial artists in the room were holding their breath. But something was changing. A subtle ripple of recognition was spreading among the crowd, like whispers through water. A young spectator, barely able to contain their excitement, whispered to the person next to them, "Wait, I think that's Chuck Norris." At first, it was a murmur. A few others caught on, and their whispers spread, growing louder. "That has to be him, the legendary Chuck Norris. No way it's really him." Seagal, oblivious to the murmurs, continued to flex his dominance, throwing strikes and attempting quick grapples. He had trained in countless dojos, faced many opponents, and had built a reputation on confidence and bravado. Today, however, that confidence seemed to be crumbling. Every move he tried to assert his superiority was met with the calm, precise deflection of a man who had mastered every possible response. Chuck Norris didn't speak. He didn't taunt. He didn't even smirk excessively. His presence alone was enough to command attention. Every subtle shift in stance, every measured step, every graceful sidestep exuded authority, skill, and absolute control. He moved like a river, steady, unshakable, and powerful beyond what words could convey. The crowd's whispers grew louder, spreading through the dojo like wildfire. People started pointing, cameras zooming in. "That's him. That's Chuck Norris. I can't believe it, he's real." Seagal, still unaware, attempted a series of flashy moves, trying to provoke Chuck into reacting aggressively. He swung his arms in wide arcs, executed high kicks, and tried a spinning throw, all designed to intimidate and impress. But Chuck's black belt mastery was on full display. Every move was deflected, every feint countered, without unnecessary motion. It was like watching water flow around rocks, effortless, natural, and absolute. The energy in the room shifted. People were no longer just spectators. They were witnesses to history. They weren't simply watching a confrontation. They were watching a lesson in discipline, humility, and mastery. The realization that the calm, silent figure before them was a living legend sent a shiver through the crowd. Phones were out, cameras flashing, some spectators holding their breath in awe. Seagal's frustration began to show. His movements became sharper, less fluid. He tried to assert control verbally, raising his voice. "Stop standing there like that. Show me what you've got." But Chuck's only response was a calm gaze, steady and unwavering. The dojo seemed to shrink around him. The air itself seemed charged, as if the room recognized the aura of a master. Someone whose skill didn't need proving, whose presence alone commanded respect. For the first time, Seagal hesitated. A flicker of doubt crossed his face. The realization began to dawn that the man he had assumed was a quiet, ordinary opponent was actually Chuck Norris, a martial artist whose reputation had been built on decades of unmatched skill, discipline, and mastery. The arrogance that had carried Seagal through so many encounters was faltering. The crowd sensed the shift. Some spectators whispered directly to their cameras, excitedly sharing the moment with the world. "Can you believe this? Who would have thought Seagal would be outmatched without even being hit?" Chuck, still composed, didn't let the recognition alter his calm demeanor. He didn't gloat, didn't flex his fame. Instead, he let the energy of the room, the murmurs, and the anticipation build, knowing that skill and mastery would speak louder than words. Seagal, now fully aware that the man standing before him was a legend, tried to regain control with more aggressive movements. Yet every attempt was met with effortless redirection. The dojo seemed to vibrate with tension, a lesson unfolding before their eyes. Arrogance could not overcome mastery, ego could not overpower skill, and true strength did not require boasting. The whispers grew into audible gasps. "That kick. He didn't even touch him. Every move, it's like he's predicting them. Chuck Norris, it really is him." The crowd's recognition added an entirely new layer of pressure. Steven Seagal's frustration and disbelief became almost tangible. The dojo was no longer just a stage for a confrontation. It had transformed into a classroom, where the students were learning a lesson in humility, precision, and mastery from the master himself. And yet, Chuck remained silent, calm, and steady, the embodiment of what mastery truly looked like. The tension between the two men had shifted, the power dynamic was clear. Seagal's ego was on the line, while Chuck's quiet authority dominated the room without effort. The moment was electric. Cameras flashed, whispers spread, and the audience held their breath. The stage was set for the turning point, the moment when the legend would prove, once and for all, that skill, patience, and calm confidence outweighed arrogance and theatrics. The dojo had transformed into a stage of pure tension. The spectators were pressed against the edges of the room, phones in hand, eyes wide with anticipation. Steven Seagal's frustration had reached a fever pitch. His movements, once controlled and confident, now carried an undercurrent of desperation. Each step was sharper, more abrupt, and his theatrics, meant to intimidate, had begun to betray his uncertainty. Chuck Norris remained perfectly calm. His stance was steady, grounded, and relaxed. Every muscle, every line of his body, spoke of decades of disciplined mastery. He didn't need to shout, move dramatically, or forcefully dominate the space. His presence alone commanded the room. The whispers of recognition from the crowd had only added to his silent authority. Seagal tried again, attempting a fast, spinning kick aimed at Chuck's side. The crowd gasped. Time seemed to slow as he launched the move, expecting an impressive reaction from Chuck. But Chuck's response was subtle, almost imperceptible. He shifted his stance just enough, redirecting the kick harmlessly. Seagal stumbled slightly, and the spectators collectively held their breath. The murmurs in the room grew louder. Did he just let it go past him? He didn't even touch him. That's Chuck Norris. It's unbelievable. Seagal's eyes narrowed. His ego demanded a reaction, a display of power that would regain control. He launched a series of rapid hand strikes, each meant to overwhelm Chuck. He moved faster, relying on strength and speed, trying to force a mistake. Yet every strike was countered with minimal movement, a subtle step, a gentle redirection, and Seagal's own momentum carried him past harmlessly. The dojo was silent except for the soft rustle of breath and the occasional whisper of awe. The crowd could not believe what they were witnessing. Seagal's attempts to dominate were failing without Chuck needing to raise his hand aggressively. The lesson was clear. Arrogance could not overpower skill, and confidence without mastery was fragile. Finally, Chuck took a small but decisive step forward. It wasn't aggressive, but the motion alone carried authority. The room felt as if it had contracted, all attention focused on him. He said nothing. He didn't need to. Every eye in the room followed his movements, every spectator leaning closer to see the silent demonstration of martial excellence. Seagal tried a feint, a trick to regain advantage, but Chuck anticipated it with ease. A slight shift in weight, a subtle pivot, and Seagal was gently guided off balance, not harmed, but completely controlled. The audience gasped. Even the younger martial artists filming the encounter whispered among themselves. It's like he can read every move before it happens. This isn't just skill, it's mastery. Chuck then executed a series of precise defensive maneuvers, each designed to demonstrate control rather than harm. His movements were economical, minimal, but devastatingly effective. Seagal's aggressive motions were rendered useless. His confidence faltered further, replaced by tension and disbelief. He realized, perhaps too late, that he had underestimated the calm, quiet force standing before him. The crowd erupted in quiet awe. Phones captured every subtle deflection, every redirection, every effortless movement. Spectators whispered to the cameras, "Do you see this? He hasn't even touched him aggressively, and Seagal can't land a single strike." Chuck's calm presence dominated the room. Seagal's frustration was now visible. A man used to commanding attention, used to being considered a master, was now being taught a lesson in humility by silent, effortless skill. The dojo was no longer just a space for confrontation. It had become a classroom in martial arts mastery. Seagal paused, chest heaving slightly, his ego bruised. He looked at Chuck Norris and, for the first time, seemed to see the full weight of the legend standing before him. Chuck's gaze was steady, almost gentle, yet carried the undeniable authority of a man who had earned every black belt and every accolade in his decades of practice. The crowd was completely captivated. The lesson was clear. Skill, patience, and mastery always outweighed arrogance, theatrics, and brute force. Chuck's calm authority had silenced not just Seagal, but every doubt in the room. Every eye, every whisper, every camera focused entirely on him. In that moment, it became undeniable. The stage had shifted. Seagal's overconfidence had crumbled, and Chuck's silent, effortless mastery had taken complete control of the room. The turning point was absolute. The moment when the legend proved that true strength was measured not by bravado, but by calm, disciplined skill. The crowd could feel it in their bones. Some whispered directly to the camera, caught up in the historic moment. If you think Chuck just proved who's the real martial arts legend, type Norris wins below. And with that, the dojo held its collective breath, waiting for the final moments. The reveal, the humiliation of arrogance, and the crowning demonstration of Chuck Norris' unrivaled mastery. The dojo was electric, buzzing with anticipation. Every spectator was on edge, some leaning forward, others holding their phones high, trying to capture every second of the legendary confrontation. Steven Seagal's frustration was palpable. His movements had grown sharper, almost desperate, but each attempt to dominate Chuck Norris only highlighted his own limitations. Chuck, meanwhile, remained calm. His stance was flawless, his breathing steady, his gaze unwavering. Every subtle shift of weight, every measured step, conveyed a mastery that required no words. The whispers in the room had grown into murmurs of awe. That has to be Chuck Norris. It's really him, the martial arts legend. Seagal, still unaware of the full magnitude of who he was facing, launched a feint followed by a rapid strike sequence. Each move was precise, meant to intimidate and overwhelm. But Chuck countered them effortlessly, redirecting Seagal's energy with minimal motion. It was as if Seagal's own force was being used against him, and yet, Chuck did not strike aggressively. He merely controlled, guided, and neutralized. The room fell into stunned silence. The younger martial artists and bystanders were in awe, whispering and exchanging glances. Cameras recorded every detail, capturing a lesson in discipline and humility that would be replayed and shared for years to come. Finally, the truth could no longer be hidden. A senior martial artist, one of the dojo instructors, stepped forward, addressing both Seagal and the crowd. Everyone, you're witnessing someone who has not only mastered martial arts, but has dedicated his entire life to discipline and mastery. This is Chuck Norris. The words hit Seagal like a thunderbolt. Recognition dawned on his face, and for the first time, the arrogance, the bravado, the overconfidence, all of it, began to crumble. He froze mid-motion, chest heaving, realization slowly settling in. This was no ordinary opponent. This was the legend, the man whose skill and calm authority had been whispered about and revered for decades. The crowd erupted into cheers, applause, and astonished whispers. People were filming, shouting, laughing in disbelief and admiration. Some rushed forward, pointing toward Chuck and exclaiming, "It really is him, Chuck Norris. I can't believe we're watching this live." Seagal stood there, a mixture of shock and humility etched across his face. His overconfidence, the very trait that had brought him into the dojo with swagger, had been dismantled effortlessly. Chuck Norris didn't gloat. He didn't revel in the humiliation. Instead, he simply stood with quiet composure, radiating authority and calm mastery. Chuck finally spoke, his voice measured and deliberate. Strength isn't measured by arrogance. It's measured by discipline, respect, and control. The crowd absorbed every word, their admiration for Chuck growing by the second. Cameras captured every second, recording not just a confrontation, but a historic lesson in martial arts, humility, and mastery. Seagal's defeat was silent, not violent, but it was complete. The lesson had been taught without unnecessary aggression, a testament to Chuck's years of experience and unparalleled skill. One of the spectators, caught up in the moment, whispered into a camera for the online audience, "If you think Chuck just proved who's the real martial arts legend, type Norris wins below." The crowd cheered louder, many standing in awe. Even those who had come expecting a showdown for entertainment realized they were witnessing a masterclass in restraint, discipline, and quiet power. Every subtle movement Chuck had made had communicated the same message: arrogance cannot overcome true mastery. Seagal, now fully aware, lowered his stance and took a step back. There was no theatrics, no defiance left. In that moment, respect replaced arrogance. He nodded subtly, a silent acknowledgement of the lesson Chuck had imparted. The dojo, which had moments ago been tense with confrontation, now resonated with admiration and awe. Chuck Norris didn't need to shout, strike, or humiliate. His calm authority had done it all. The energy in the room shifted, from tension to recognition, from competition to respect. The students, the spectators, and even the cameras captured this historical moment, a lesson in humility, mastery, and the power of calm strength. And with that, the reveal was complete. The legend had spoken, and the world, or at least everyone in the room, had witnessed it firsthand. Chuck Norris' black belt mastery was undeniable. Seagal's arrogance had been humbled, and the audience had experienced a moment that would be remembered and shared across the globe. The dojo was still buzzing with energy, though the tension that had gripped it for hours had transformed into awe and admiration. Spectators, some still holding their phones high, whispered excitedly to each other and to the cameras. "Did you see that? Chuck didn't even have to throw a single hit. Seagal's arrogance, gone in a heartbeat. I can't believe we're witnessing history." Videos of the encounter were already being uploaded, shared, and streamed across social media. Clips of Chuck Norris effortlessly neutralizing Seagal's moves, maintaining perfect calm, and finally revealing his legendary identity were going viral within minutes. Comments poured in from around the world, fans praising Chuck's skill, respect, and composure, martial artists analyzing every move, and ordinary viewers expressing awe at the legendary display of discipline and mastery. Seagal, meanwhile, had stepped back to the edge of the dojo, taking a moment to collect himself. The arrogance and bravado that had fueled him earlier had vanished, replaced with humility and perhaps a grudging respect. Chuck, ever composed, walked calmly to one side of the dojo, acknowledging the crowd without any hint of gloating. The contrast between the two men was striking, one humbled, one serene, both leaving the spectators with a powerful lesson about skill, patience, and restraint. The crowd erupted into cheers and applause as Chuck raised his hand slightly, not in triumph, but in acknowledgement of the spectators' admiration. Students of martial arts and casual onlookers alike were inspired. This wasn't just a display of skill, it was a demonstration of character. The lesson was clear. Arrogance can be dismantled without aggression. Mastery is silent but undeniable, and true strength is always accompanied by humility. Social media exploded. Clips of the encounter were shared with hashtags like hashtag Chuck Norris, hashtag legendary martial artist, hashtag respect the master, and hashtag Seagal vs. Norris. Fans around the world commented from different countries and cities, sharing their amazement and admiration. The story transcended martial arts. It became a viral message about respect, humility, and the power of calm authority. Journalists and bloggers picked up the story, analyzing every detail. The flawless defensive techniques, the effortless redirections, the psychological mastery displayed by Chuck Norris. Articles highlighted the lesson that skill and patience always triumph over arrogance and theatrics. Even Seagal's fans acknowledged the display, recognizing that he had been outclassed not by brute force, but by calm, precise mastery. Amidst the excitement, Chuck turned to Seagal, speaking quietly but firmly. Remember, true strength isn't about proving yourself to others. It's about mastering yourself. Seagal nodded subtly, a silent acknowledgement of the lesson he had just received. The dojo, once a battleground of pride and ego, had transformed into a space of reflection, inspiration, and admiration. As the crowd slowly dispersed, many remained behind, discussing what they had witnessed, analyzing Chuck's movements, and sharing the experience online. The viral videos continued to circulate, spreading the story to millions worldwide. Comments poured in. If you think Chuck just proved who's the real martial arts legend, type Norris wins. Respect above arrogance. That's the lesson. This made my day. Incredible demonstration of mastery. Chuck Norris' message was clear, and it resonated far beyond the dojo. Mastery, discipline, and humility had triumphed. The world had witnessed a showdown that was never about violence. It was about skill, patience, and respect. And with the story shared across continents, the moral of the encounter spread with it. True strength is not about being stronger than others. It's about being stronger than your own ego. For every viewer, every spectator, and every martial artist watching, the final lesson was unforgettable. Chuck Norris had demonstrated, in action and in silence, that real mastery commands respect without needing to shout or strike. And for Steven Seagal, the encounter would remain a humbling, unforgettable reminder that arrogance cannot match discipline. If you believe true strength comes from discipline, patience, and humility, type respect in the comments, and subscribe for more legendary stories that inspire. The dojo fell silent once again, but the echoes of that extraordinary moment, the viral showdown, the lesson in humility, and the demonstration of unparalleled mastery, would linger forever in the hearts and minds of those who witnessed it.